Your thoughts are the only thing standing between you and the life you want. In just 7 days, you'll rewire your mind for discipline, confidence, and limitless success. This isn't motivation, it's a mental reset that changes everything. The Inner Shift. Audiobook. Introduction. You're running outdated software. Right now, at this very moment, your mind is operating on programming installed years ago, maybe even decades ago. Every decision you make, every goal you abandon, every time you hold yourself back, it's not really you making those choices, it's your old programming running the show. But here's what changes everything. You can rewrite that code. Not through years of therapy, not through endless self-help books that leave you inspired but unchanged. You can fundamentally rewire your brain for success in just 7 days. This isn't another feel-good manual filled with empty promises. This is a precise, scientific reprogramming of your mental operating system. Each day builds upon the last, systematically dismantling the old code that's keeping you stuck and installing new programming that makes success your default state. Day by day, you'll watch as self-doubt transforms into unshakable confidence. Procrastination morphs into automatic action. Fear becomes fuel. This isn't about forcing yourself to change through willpower. It's about changing who you are at your core so that success becomes as natural as breathing. You stand at a crossroads. The next 7 days will determine the trajectory of your entire life. This audiobook is your blueprint for transformation, but only if you commit fully to the process. No half measures, no skipping ahead, no retreat. I promise you this, if you follow this system exactly as outlined, your life will fundamentally change. The person who closes this audiobook will not be the same one who opened it. The choice is yours. Are you ready to upgrade your mental software? Chapter 1. Breaking the Mental Cage. Imagine waking up one day to realize you've been living inside a cage your entire life, but the door was never locked. You were free to leave at any time, but you never did, because no one ever told you that you could. Each morning, you've gone through the same routines, accepted the same limitations, and lived within the same boundaries. Not because they were real, but because you believed they were. Right now, that's exactly what's happening in your mind. You've been conditioned by years of experiences, upbringing, and societal messaging to believe that your success has limits. These invisible barriers feel as solid as steel, but they're as fragile as cobwebs. The cage exists only in your mind. Your brain is running programs you never consciously installed. Like a computer operating on outdated software, these mental patterns were written years ago, by parents who meant well but passed on their own limitations, by teachers who labeled you, by early failures that taught you to play it safe, by society's expectations of what someone like you should or shouldn't achieve. This invisible programming runs deeper than most realize. Every time you tell yourself, "I'm not good enough," every time you hesitate to take a risk, every time you settle for less than what you truly want, that's not your authentic voice speaking. It's your programming running its familiar script. Consider Roger Bannister's story. For decades, the 4-minute mile stood as an impenetrable barrier in athletics. Medical experts claimed it was physically impossible for the human body to run a mile in under 4 minutes. Athletes accepted this limitation as fact. Training programs were designed around this supposed ceiling of human capability. Then, on May 6, 1954, Roger Bannister did the impossible. He ran a mile in 3 minutes and 59.4 seconds. But here's what's truly fascinating. Within just 46 days of Bannister's achievement, Australian runner John Landy broke the record again. Within 3 years, 16 other runners had also broken the 4-minute barrier. The human body hadn't suddenly evolved. What changed was the mental programming that said it couldn't be done. This same principle applies to every area of your life. The limitations you accept as reality are often just collective beliefs that haven't been challenged. Your income ceiling, your fitness goals, your business ambitions, they're all governed by mental programming you can rewrite. The first step in breaking free is becoming aware of the programs running in your mind. These beliefs are so deeply embedded that they feel like facts rather than programming. They disguise themselves as being realistic or knowing your limitations. But they're just lines of code that can be rewritten. Take a moment now to examine your own mental programming. What stories do you tell yourself about what you can or cannot achieve? What limitations have you accepted as just the way things are? These aren't casual thoughts. They're active programs shaping your reality. Leo, a gifted musician, spent 15 years working in corporate finance because his father once told him music isn't a real career. This single line of programming shaped his entire life path. He accepted it as truth, never questioning whether it was just someone else's limitation installed in his mind. The day Leo recognized this belief as programming rather than fact, everything shifted. Within 2 years, he had built a successful music production business, not because his talents suddenly improved, but because he rewrote the mental program that was holding him back. Your transformation begins with this crucial understanding. You are not your programming. The thoughts that tell you to play it safe, to aim lower, to accept less, they're not your authentic voice. They're outdated software running on autopilot. For the next 24 hours, your challenge is this. Identify one limiting belief you've been carrying. It might be about money, I'll never be wealthy, abilities, I'm not creative, or potential, people like me don't start successful businesses. Write it down. Then ask yourself, is this really true? Or is it just programming I've accepted without question? What new beliefs will you choose to install once you realize the cage door was never locked? Chapter 2. Disrupting the Default Mode. Have you ever driven home, parked your car, and realized you barely remember the journey? That strange moment when you snap back to awareness, wondering how you navigated traffic, made turns, and arrived safely, all while your conscious mind was somewhere else entirely? This autopilot mode isn't just limited to driving. Right now, your entire life is running on similar unconscious patterns, preset routes that your brain follows without questioning. Your morning routine, your reactions to stress, your self-talk when facing challenges, these aren't conscious choices. They're automated programs running in the background of your mind. Your brain, in its endless quest for efficiency, has turned your behaviors, thoughts, and even your limitations into default settings. Think about it. When was the last time you consciously decided to doubt yourself? When did you actively choose to procrastinate? These responses feel natural because they've become your brain's path of least resistance. Like water flowing downhill, your thoughts and actions follow deeply carved channels, patterns so ingrained that they feel like your personality rather than programming. But here's where it gets interesting. These mental highways weren't always there. They were created through repetition, carved deeper with each thought, each action, each moment of hesitation or self-doubt. And just like a river can be redirected, these mental pathways can be altered, but only if you first disrupt the flow. Observe Steve Jobs, one of the most innovative minds of our time. He understood something crucial about the brain's tendency toward automation. Every morning, he put on the same black turtleneck, the same jeans, the same sneakers. This wasn't about fashion. It was about cognitive efficiency. By eliminating the daily decision of what to wear, he freed up mental energy for more important choices. Jobs recognized that automation itself isn't the enemy. In fact, it's one of your brain's most powerful features. The problem isn't that your brain automates processes. It's that you've allowed it to automate the wrong ones. While Jobs deliberately automated mundane decisions to focus on innovation, most people unconsciously automate self-limiting behaviors, negative self-talk, and fear-based responses. Look at how Jobs applied this principle beyond just his wardrobe. When he returned to Apple in 1997, the company had a confusing lineup of dozens of products. His first action was to disrupt this pattern by slashing the product line to just 4 core items. He understood that sometimes progress requires interrupting established patterns, even when they feel comfortable or safe. The science behind this is fascinating. Your brain operates on neural pathways, literally, paths that electrical signals follow through your nervous system. The more you think or behave in a certain way, the stronger and more efficient these pathways become. It's like a trail through a forest. The more it's used, the clearer and easier to follow it becomes. But here's the key. These pathways aren't permanent. Thanks to neuroplasticity, Your brain can form new connections and reshape existing ones. However, this doesn't happen automatically. You must first interrupt the current pattern, create a roadblock on that well-worn path, forcing your brain to find or create new routes. This is where conscious disruption comes in. Every time you catch yourself in an automatic response and choose differently, you're weakening the old pathway and beginning to carve a new one. It's uncomfortable at first, like trying to write with your non-dominant hand. But this discomfort is the sensation of new neural pathways being formed. Maya's story illustrates this perfectly. A talented graphic designer, she had a pattern of sabotaging herself before big opportunities. Whenever a major client or project came along, she would find reasons to back out before she could fail. This wasn't a conscious choice. It was an automated response programmed by past experiences. The pattern was simple, but devastating. Opportunity appears. Fear rises. Create excuse. Withdraw. Feel relief. Reinforce pattern. This cycle repeated for years until Maya learned about pattern interruption. She began catching herself in the middle of this automated response. The next time a major opportunity arose, a chance to lead the rebranding of a well-known company, Maya felt the familiar fear rising. But this time, instead of following her usual pattern, she disrupted it. When her brain automatically generated excuses, "I'm not ready," "someone else would do it better," she consciously interrupted these thoughts. She created new patterns. Fear rises. Take deep breath. Question the fear. Take one small action forward. It felt unnatural at first, like trying to walk in a straight line while looking through a kaleidoscope. But with each disruption of the old pattern, the new one became stronger. Within 6 months, Maya had completely rewired her response to opportunities. The old pattern of self-sabotage hadn't disappeared entirely, but it no longer controlled her actions. She successfully led that rebranding project, which opened doors to even bigger opportunities, all because she learned to disrupt her default mode. Your brain is running similar patterns right now. Some serve you well, like automatically checking your mirrors while driving. Others, like reflexively checking social media when you feel uncomfortable, or mentally rehearsing failure scenarios when facing challenges, are holding you back. The key is learning to recognize these patterns in real time. Notice when you're running on autopilot. Pay attention to your default responses to stress, opportunity, or uncertainty. These automated behaviors aren't your destiny. They're just deeply ingrained habits waiting to be disrupted. Chapter 3. Rewiring your mental programming. Your brain doesn't care what's true. It only believes what you tell it over and over again. If you repeat, "I'm not good at public speaking," enough times, it will become your reality. But what if you started feeding it a different message? What if you could rewire your brain to believe in your ability, confidence, and inevitable success? The human brain is remarkably plastic, not in the material sense, but in its ability to reshape itself based on repeated thoughts and experiences. Every time you think a thought, you're either reinforcing an existing neural pathway or creating a new one. It's like walking through a field of tall grass. Each time you take the same path, it becomes more defined, easier to follow. This is why your current beliefs feel so real, so unshakable. You've been walking the same mental paths for years, perhaps decades. Those well-worn trails of self-doubt, limitation, and fear aren't facts. They're just frequently used routes in your mind. Look at Jim Carrey's story. In 1985, he was a struggling comedian living out of a van. But instead of accepting this as his reality, he did something remarkable. He wrote himself a check for $10 million, dated it 5 years in the future, and labeled it "for acting services rendered." He carried this check in his wallet every day, looking at it whenever doubt crept in. This wasn't just positive thinking or manifestation. It was systematic brain rewiring. Every time he looked at that check, he strengthened the neural pathways associated with success. He wasn't just dreaming. He was literally programming his brain to recognize and pursue opportunities that aligned with this new reality. By 1994, something extraordinary happened. Carrey was offered a role in Dumb and Dumber for exactly $10 million. The check he had written to himself years earlier had become reality. Not through magic, but through consistent mental programming that changed how his brain perceived and acted upon opportunities. The science behind this is fascinating. Your brain operates through neural networks, interconnected pathways that fire together based on your thoughts and experiences. When you consistently think certain thoughts or visualize specific outcomes, you're literally rewiring your neural circuitry. This isn't pseudoscience. It's neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. Think about learning to ride a bike. At first, it seems impossible. Your brain has no neural pathway for balancing on two wheels while pedaling. But with practice, what once required intense concentration becomes automatic. Your brain has literally rewired itself to make this complex action feel natural. The same principle applies to your beliefs about success, confidence, and capability. Right now, your current limitations feel as real as gravity. But they're just well-worn neural pathways, and they can be rewired through consistent, intentional practice. Take Aiden's story. As a first-time entrepreneur, his mind was filled with thoughts like, "I'm not experienced enough," and "Who am I to start a business?" These weren't just passing doubts. They were his brain's default programming, strengthened by years of self-doubt. But Aiden learned about neuroplasticity and decided to experiment. He began consciously replacing "I'm not experienced enough" with "I am learning and adapting every day." At first, it felt fake. His brain rejected the new programming like a body rejecting a transplant. But he persisted. Every morning, he wrote down his new belief. When meeting potential clients, he focused on what he could offer rather than what he lacked. When faced with challenges, he reframed them as learning opportunities. Gradually, something shifted. The new neural pathways strengthened while the old ones weakened from disuse. Within months, Aiden's business started growing. Not because he suddenly gained years of experience, but because his rewired brain began recognizing and acting on opportunities his old programming would have dismissed. His new belief, "I am learning and adapting every day," had become his reality. The implications of this are profound. Every limitation you currently accept, every "I can't" or "I'm not good enough," is just a program running in your mental software. And like any software, it can be updated. Here's your challenge for the next 24 hours. Choose one limiting belief that's been holding you back. Write down its opposite, not as a wish, but as a statement of fact. If your current programming says, "I'm terrible at networking," your new belief might be, "I connect easily and authentically with others." Carry this new belief with you throughout the day. Every time your old programming tries to run, consciously override it with your new thought. Write it down. Say it aloud when you're alone. Most importantly, act as if it's already true. Chapter 4. Mastering Fear, the Ultimate Power Move. Fear doesn't care about your dreams. It doesn't care about your ambitions, your goals, or the life you want to create. Its only job is to keep you safe, even if that means keeping you small. Right now, fear is running your life in ways you don't even realize, convincing you that you're not ready, that you'll fail, that you should wait. But here's the truth. Fear is just a chemical reaction in your brain, not a prophecy. And once you learn to override it, you become unstoppable. Your brain has a sophisticated alarm system that evolved over millions of years. This system, centered in the amygdala, doesn't distinguish between a saber-toothed tiger and public speaking. To your primitive brain, threat is threat. When you feel that surge of anxiety before pitching an idea or asking for a raise, that's your amygdala firing, flooding your system with stress hormones, preparing you to fight or flee. But here's what's fascinating. This same system that can paralyze you with fear can also be rewired to serve your success. Understanding this changed everything for Elon Musk when he founded SpaceX. The odds were stacked against him. The space industry was dominated by government agencies and massive corporations. The likelihood of a private company succeeding was minimal. Every rational analysis suggested failure. Yet Musk invested nearly all his PayPal fortune, $100 million, into SpaceX. Was he fearless? Absolutely not. In interviews, he's admitted to experiencing intense fear and doubt. The difference was his relationship with fear. He understood something crucial. Fear is information, not instruction. The first 3 SpaceX launches failed spectacularly. Each failure cost millions and brought the company closer to bankruptcy. The fear was real, the stakes were enormous, but Musk's response wasn't to retreat, it was to reframe. He saw each failure as data, each setback as a lesson. His famous quote captures this perfectly. When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. This wasn't blind courage, it was strategic fear management. Musk did something that you can learn to do. He separated the signal from the noise. Fear was screaming, "Stop! This is dangerous." But instead of accepting this as truth, he analyzed it. Was this fear protecting him from real danger, or was it just trying to maintain comfortable familiarity? The science behind this is compelling. When you face a fear-inducing situation, your amygdala activates within milliseconds, before your conscious mind can even process what's happening. This is the first fear, automatic, instinctive, and often irrational. But humans have another brain region, the prefrontal cortex, capable of analyzing and overriding this initial response. This is where your power lies. Think about learning to swim. The first time you enter deep water, your amygdala screams danger. But through gradual exposure and conscious override, you teach your brain that water isn't a threat. You don't eliminate the fear response, you master it. This same principle applies to every fear holding you back. That knot in your stomach before speaking up in meetings? It's just your amygdala doing its job. The difference between those who succeed and those who stay stuck isn't the absence of fear. It's the ability to move forward despite it. Jordan was a talented developer who always hesitated to share his ideas in team meetings. His fear told him he wasn't qualified enough, that his suggestions would be rejected, that he'd look foolish. This wasn't just emotional discomfort. It was costing him promotions and opportunities. During a crucial project meeting, Jordan noticed his familiar fear response kicking in. Racing heart, dry mouth, that urge to stay silent. But this time, instead of letting fear make the decision, he used his prefrontal cortex to analyze the situation. What was the actual worst that could happen? His idea might not be accepted. Some colleagues might disagree. But would any of these outcomes actually harm him? He raised his hand and shared his solution. His voice shook slightly. Fear was still present, but he spoke anyway. His idea wasn't just accepted, it became the foundation for a major project improvement. This single moment of choosing action over avoidance changed his trajectory. Within months, he was leading his own team. Jordan's story illustrates a crucial truth. Fear never completely disappears, but it can be mastered. Each time you act despite fear, you're rewiring your brain's response pattern. You're teaching your amygdala that discomfort doesn't equal danger. The process is straightforward but profound. First, recognize fear for what it is, a sensation, not a command. When you feel that familiar tightness in your chest or knot in your stomach, name it. This is my amygdala responding to perceived threat. Next, analyze the fear rationally. What's the actual worst-case scenario? How likely is it? What's the potential benefit if you move forward? This engages your prefrontal cortex, bringing logic to balance emotion. Finally, and this is crucial, act while feeling afraid. Don't wait for the fear to disappear. Every time you take action despite fear, you're building new neural pathways that associate courage with reward rather than threat with danger. Your challenge for the next 24 hours is this. Do one thing that fear has been holding you back from. It doesn't need to be massive. Start where you are. If speaking up in meetings terrifies you, contribute one comment. If you've been afraid to start that side project, spend 30 minutes on it today. If you've been avoiding a difficult conversation, initiate it. Document how you feel before, during, and after. You'll likely notice something remarkable. The anticipatory fear was far worse than the actual experience. This is your brain learning, in real time, that fear is often a false alarm. Remember, fear will always be part of your journey. The goal isn't to eliminate it, but to master it, When you learn to move forward despite fear, you don't just overcome obstacles, you transform them into stepping stones toward your greatest achievements. Chapter 5. Emotional Mastery. Training your mind for unshakable confidence. Confidence isn't something you're born with, it's something you train. Right now, your brain has been programmed to react to stress, failure, and setbacks in a way that weakens you. But what if you could rewire it? What if, instead of feeling overwhelmed, you automatically felt calm and in control? Instead of shrinking in self-doubt, you felt unstoppable. This is not about fake positivity. It's about scientifically rewiring your response to life's challenges so that you become naturally confident and resilient. Your emotional responses aren't random. They're learned behaviors, deeply ingrained patterns that have been reinforced over time. Every time you face a challenge, your brain follows the same neural pathways it's used before. If those pathways lead to self-doubt, anxiety, or overwhelm, that's what you'll experience. But here's the breakthrough insight. Neural pathways can be rewired. Think of your emotional responses like water flowing down a hillside. Over time, the water creates deeper and deeper grooves, making it increasingly likely that future rainfall will follow the same path. Your emotional reactions work the same way. They follow the paths of least resistance, the patterns that have been carved into your neural circuitry through repetition. Oprah Winfrey's journey provides a powerful illustration of this principle. Born into poverty in rural Mississippi, raised in inner-city Milwaukee, and facing numerous personal traumas in her early life, Winfrey had every reason to develop negative emotional patterns. The default grooves in her mind could have easily led to victimhood, resentment, or defeat. Instead, she consciously rewired her response to adversity. In her early career, she was told she was unfit for television news because of her emotional investment in stories. Rather than accepting this as a setback, she reframed it as her greatest strength. When she was demoted from her co-anchor position at Baltimore's WJZ-TV, instead of seeing it as failure, she viewed it as redirection toward her true path. What's remarkable about Winfrey's story isn't just her success. It's how she systematically transformed her emotional responses to challenges. She didn't just think positive or try to suppress negative emotions. She actively rewired her brain's response patterns. When faced with obstacles, she trained herself to ask, "What is this teaching me?" instead of, "Why is this happening to me?" This wasn't just positive thinking. It was neural reprogramming. Each time she chose a different response to adversity, she was carving new pathways in her brain. Over time, these new patterns became her default mode. Confidence and resilience weren't traits she was born with. They were skills she deliberately developed through consistent practice. The science behind this is fascinating. When you experience a challenging situation, your brain releases stress hormones within milliseconds. This is automatic and unconscious. But what happens next is crucial and controllable. The secondary response, which occurs in your prefrontal cortex, is where your power lies. This is where you can interrupt the automatic pattern and choose a different response. Research in neuroplasticity shows that every time you consciously choose a different response to a trigger, you're physically altering your brain's circuitry. It's like creating a new path through untamed wilderness. The first few times are difficult, but with repetition, the path becomes clearer and easier to follow. This brings us to the practical application of emotional mastery. The key is not to avoid triggering situations, but to use them as opportunities for rewiring. Every challenge becomes a chance to strengthen your new neural pathways. Sophia's story perfectly illustrates this transformation. As a graphic designer, feedback was an essential part of her work. But every time a client requested revisions, she would spiral into self-doubt. Her automatic response pattern went something like this: criticism, personal inadequacy, emotional withdrawal, decreased performance, more criticism. This cycle had become so ingrained that it was operating completely on autopilot. The turning point came when she learned about emotional rewiring. Instead of trying to avoid criticism or toughen up, she focused on creating a new response pattern. She developed a simple but powerful protocol. When receiving feedback, she would first pause and take a deep breath. This simple act created space between the trigger and her response, interrupting the automatic pattern. Then, she would consciously reframe the situation. This feedback isn't about my worth, it's data that can make my work better. Initially, this felt artificial and difficult. Her old neural pathways were still strong, pulling her toward the familiar pattern of self-doubt. But with consistent practice, something remarkable happened. The new response began to feel more natural. After a few weeks, she noticed she was actually looking forward to client feedback as an opportunity for growth. Within 3 months, her professional reputation had transformed. Clients began commenting on her exceptional ability to handle feedback constructively. Her work improved dramatically because she was no longer held back by emotional resistance to criticism. The key insight from Sophia's transformation is that she didn't try to eliminate her emotional responses. She rewired them. She turned what was once a trigger for self-doubt into a trigger for growth and improvement. This same principle applies to every emotional pattern holding you back. Whether it's fear of public speaking, anxiety about leadership roles, or self-doubt about your abilities, these responses can be rewired. The process is always the same. Pause, interrupt the automatic pattern, and consciously choose a new response. Over time, this practice creates what psychologists call emotional agility, the ability to respond to challenges from a place of choice rather than automatic reaction. It's not about suppressing emotions or maintaining constant positivity. It's about developing the ability to choose your response rather than being driven by unconscious patterns. Chapter 6: The Success Habit Formula. Making Progress Automatic. You don't need more motivation. You don't need more willpower. What you need is a system that makes success automatic. Right now, every successful person you admire is not succeeding because they have superhuman discipline, but because they have built habits that make success inevitable. The real question isn't, how do I stay motivated? It's, how do I make sure I don't need motivation at all? Think about your morning routine. Do you need motivation to brush your teeth? Do you have to psych yourself up to take a shower? Of course not. These actions are automatic. They're habits so deeply ingrained that you perform them without conscious thought or effort. Now imagine if your path to success operated the same way. The human brain is designed for efficiency. It's constantly looking for ways to automate behaviors and create shortcuts. This is why you can drive home without actively thinking about the route, or type without looking at your keyboard. Your brain has turned complex actions into automatic routines. Stephen King's story perfectly illustrates this principle. Every morning, he sits down to write at exactly the same time, in the same place, with the same cup of tea. He doesn't wait for inspiration. He doesn't check if he's in the mood to write. He simply shows up and does the work. This isn't motivation. It's automation. King has written over 60 novels and 200 short stories, not because he's more talented or more motivated than other writers, but because he has built a system that makes writing inevitable. He has removed the need for motivation entirely. In his own words, amateurs sit and wait for inspiration. The rest of us just get up and go to work. The science behind this is fascinating. When you repeat an action consistently, your brain creates neural pathways that make that action easier and more automatic. It's like water flowing down a hill. Over time, it carves deeper channels that make the flow more efficient. This is why habits become stronger the more you repeat them. But here's where most people get it wrong. They try to build too many habits at once, or they make their initial habits too ambitious. They decide to wake up at 5 a.m., work out for an hour, meditate, journal, and read, all starting tomorrow. This approach almost always fails because it requires too much conscious effort and willpower. The key is to start with what neuroscientists call a minimum viable habit, an action so small it feels almost ridiculous. Want to build a reading habit? Start with 1 page per day. Want to exercise more? Begin with 1 push-up. These tiny actions might seem insignificant, but they serve a crucial purpose. They establish the neural pathway for the habit. Take Darren's transformation. As a busy professional, he had tried countless times to establish a consistent workout routine. Each attempt followed the same pattern. high motivation for a few weeks, followed by burnout and abandonment. He was caught in the motivation trap, relying on temporary enthusiasm rather than sustainable systems. Everything changed when he learned about habit automation. Instead of committing to hour-long gym sessions, he started with a simple promise to himself: put on his workout clothes and do 5 minutes of exercise every morning. That's it. No pressure to do more, no guilt if he stopped after 5 minutes. The first week, something interesting happened. Most days, once he was dressed and had started moving, he naturally wanted to continue beyond the 5 minutes. By removing the pressure of a lengthy workout, he had eliminated the mental resistance that had previously stopped him from starting. By week 2, the habit was beginning to feel automatic. He no longer debated with himself each morning about whether to exercise. He just did it, like brushing his teeth. By month 3, he had naturally expanded his workouts to 30 minutes, not because he forced himself, but because the habit had evolved organically. The key insight from Darren's story isn't just that he succeeded in building a workout habit. It's that he succeeded by making the habit automatic, rather than relying on motivation. He removed the need for decision-making, eliminated the opportunity for excuses, and created a system that made success inevitable. This same principle can be applied to any area of life where you want to create lasting change. Whether it's building a business, learning a new skill, or improving relationships, the key is to establish automatic behaviors that move you toward your goals without requiring constant conscious effort. Think about the most successful person you know in your field. What separates them from others isn't usually raw talent or motivation. It's their habits. They've built systems that make success automatic. They don't rely on feeling inspired to take action. They've programmed their success into their daily routine. Your challenge for the next 24 hours is simple but powerful. Choose one small action that aligns with your biggest goal, something so easy you can't fail. Maybe it's sending one email to a potential client, writing one paragraph of your book, or doing 1 minute of deep breathing. The size of the action doesn't matter. What matters is making it automatic. Chapter 7: Identity. The ultimate game changer. Right now, you have an identity, whether you realize it or not. It's made up of everything you believe about yourself, from how disciplined you think you are to how successful you expect to be. But here's the problem. Your identity is outdated. You've been carrying around an old self-image based on past experiences, failures, and limitations. And as long as you see yourself the same way, you'll keep getting the same results. Think about this. Every morning, you wake up and step into a role. You might see yourself as someone who tries hard but never quite makes it, or perhaps as someone who isn't really cut out for success. These aren't just thoughts. They're the operating system running your life. They determine every decision you make, every risk you take or don't take, and every goal you pursue or abandon. But what if you could become someone else? Someone who wins, succeeds, and operates at a completely different level? What if, instead of trying to change your actions, you changed who you fundamentally believe yourself to be? The science behind identity is fascinating. Your brain constantly works to maintain consistency between your actions and your self-image. If you see yourself as someone who struggles with discipline, your brain will actually resist behaviors that don't match that identity. It's not about willpower or motivation. It's about alignment with your core beliefs about yourself. Muhammad Ali's story perfectly illustrates this principle. Long before he became the greatest boxer of all time, he declared, "I am the greatest." He didn't wait for success to claim this identity. He claimed the identity first, and success followed. People thought he was arrogant or delusional, but Ali understood something profound. Identity precedes achievement. When Ali said, "I am the greatest," he wasn't just using positive affirmations. He was programming his neural pathways to align with that identity. Every morning when he trained, every time he stepped into the ring, he wasn't fighting to become great. He was fighting because he was already great in his mind. His actions naturally flowed from this unshakable self-image. This isn't just about positive thinking or wishful dreaming. It's about fundamentally rewiring how your brain processes who you are. When you adopt a new identity, you're not just changing your thoughts, you're changing the very foundation of your decision-making process. Consider how this plays out in your daily life. If you identify as someone who struggles with money, you'll unconsciously make decisions that reinforce that identity. You'll hesitate to negotiate salary increases, overlook investment opportunities, or talk yourself out of starting that side business. Not because you lack capability, but because these actions would conflict with who you believe yourself to be. The good news is that identity is not fixed. It's a choice. Just as you've learned to see yourself in certain ways, you can consciously choose to see yourself differently. This isn't about denial or pretense. It's about intentionally stepping into a new version of yourself. The process begins with a simple but powerful shift. Instead of focusing on what you want to do or achieve, focus on who you need to become. Don't say, "I want to build a successful business." Say, "I am a successful entrepreneur who makes strategic decisions and leads with vision." The difference might seem subtle, but it's transformative. Ethan's story demonstrates this principle in action. For years, he struggled to get his consulting business off the ground. Despite having deep expertise in his field, he kept seeing himself as an amateur trying to make it. This identity manifested in everything he did, from his pricing, too low, to his client interactions, too apologetic, to his business decisions, too cautious. The turning point came when he realized that his results weren't matching his potential because his identity was holding him back. He made a conscious decision to step into the identity of a high-level business owner. Instead of asking, "What would someone like me do?" he started asking, "What would a successful CEO do in this situation?" The transformation was remarkable. He began showing up differently in meetings, speaking with more authority, and making bolder business moves. He raised his prices to reflect his true value, started turning down clients who weren't a good fit, and began positioning himself as a thought leader in his industry. Within 6 months, his revenue had tripled. Not because he learned new skills or worked harder, but because he was operating from a different identity. His actions naturally aligned with who he now believed himself to be. The key insight from Ethan's story isn't just that he became more successful, it's that his success came from changing his identity first. He didn't wait until he had made it to act like a successful business owner. He became one in his mind first, and his reality caught up with his self-image. This same principle applies to every area of your life where you want to create change. Whether it's health, relationships, career, or personal growth, the fastest way to transform your results is to transform your identity. Think about someone you admire in your field. How do they see themselves? How do they carry themselves? How do they make decisions? The gap between where you are and where they are isn't just about skills or opportunities. It's about identity. Your current identity was built through years of experiences, messages, and beliefs. Some of these were chosen consciously, but most were absorbed unconsciously from your environment, past experiences, and other people's expectations. The power lies in realizing that you can consciously choose a new identity starting right now. This isn't about pretending to be someone you're not. It's about aligning with who you truly are beneath the layers of limiting beliefs and old programming. It's about stepping into your full potential instead of playing small based on outdated self-images. Your challenge for the next 24 hours is simple but powerful. Make every decision as your future self. Before each choice, ask yourself, what would the successful version of me do in this situation? Then act accordingly. No hesitation, no second guessing, just full embodiment of your new identity. Chapter 8. Locking in the Shift. Most people start strong but fall back into old habits. They get excited about change, see progress, and then, without even realizing it, slip back into their default programming. Why? Because change isn't about effort, it's about wiring. And unless you lock in your new mindset, your brain will try to revert to the familiar. But what if this time, you made the shift permanent? Your brain is constantly seeking equilibrium, a state of predictable patterns and familiar responses. This is why even positive changes can feel uncomfortable at first. Your neural pathways are like well-worn trails through a forest. Your thoughts naturally want to follow the established routes, even if they lead to destinations you no longer want to reach. Understanding this mechanism is crucial because it reveals why willpower alone isn't enough. You can't fight your brain's natural tendency toward the familiar. You have to work with it, rewiring it systematically until the new patterns become the default. The science behind this is fascinating. When you repeat a thought or behavior, you strengthen the neural connections associated with it. This process, called neuroplasticity, is like laying down new fiber optic cables in your brain. The more you use these new pathways, the stronger and faster they become, until they eventually replace the old ones. Walt Disney's journey perfectly illustrates this principle. Before becoming the icon we know today, Disney faced a series of crushing setbacks. He was fired from a newspaper for lacking imagination. His first animation company went bankrupt. He lost the rights to his popular character Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. But what made Disney different wasn't just his persistence, it was his unshakable self-image. Disney didn't see himself as someone trying to succeed in animation. He saw himself as someone who created magic, period. This wasn't just positive thinking. It was identity-level programming that became stronger with every setback. Each failure reinforced not defeat, but his commitment to innovation and creativity. He famously said, "All our dreams can come true if we have the courage to pursue them." This wasn't a motivational quote. It was his operating system. The key insight from Disney's story is that he didn't just maintain his vision despite failures. He used those challenges to strengthen his core identity. Every time he faced opposition, instead of questioning his path, he doubled down on his self-image as an innovator and creator. This is how you make transformation permanent, by using every experience, especially the challenging ones, to reinforce your new programming. The process of locking in your shift requires deliberate reinforcement. Your brain needs consistent evidence that your new identity is real, valid, and permanent. This isn't about forcing yourself to think positive thoughts. It's about systematically proving to your nervous system that this is who you are now. Lena's story demonstrates how this works in practice. As a marketing professional, she had always struggled with imposter syndrome, constantly second-guessing her expertise and undervaluing her services. Even when she made progress, she would eventually slide back into old patterns of self-doubt and undercharging. The turning point came when she realized that her temporary successes weren't sticking because she hadn't locked in her new identity. She developed a simple but powerful reinforcement strategy. Every evening, she documented 3 ways she had acted as a high-level expert that day. Sometimes these were big wins, like landing a major client. Other times they were subtle shifts, like speaking with more authority in meetings or setting firm boundaries with scope creep. The key wasn't the size of the actions. It was the consistent reinforcement that this was who she was now. She wasn't trying to become an expert. She was documenting evidence of her expertise. Within months, her old self-doubting identity had been completely overwritten by her new, confident self-image. This process of reinforcement isn't just about celebrating wins. It's about creating a feedback loop that makes your new identity the path of least resistance for your brain. When you consistently reinforce your new patterns, your nervous system begins to expect success rather than brace for failure. Your challenge for the next 24 hours is to become a conscious reinforcer of your new identity. Every time you catch yourself acting in alignment with your desired self-image, pause and acknowledge it. Write it down. Speak it out loud. Make it real. This isn't about pride or celebration. It's about programming. Every reinforcement is another strand in the unbreakable cable of your new identity. Chapter 9. The Confidence Loop. Confidence isn't magic. It's not something you're born with or something only lucky people have. Confidence is a loop, a cycle of action, success, and reinforcement. But here's the mistake most people make. They wait until they feel confident before they take action. The truth? You build confidence by taking action first. Think about this. Every time you hesitate, every time you wait to feel ready, you're actually training your brain to doubt itself. Your nervous system interprets hesitation as evidence that you should be afraid. But what if you could reverse this cycle? What if, instead of waiting for confidence to appear, you could build it systematically through deliberate action? The science behind confidence is fascinating. Your brain doesn't actually know the difference between real and perceived threats. When you avoid taking action because of self-doubt, your brain registers this as confirmation that the situation was truly dangerous. This creates a negative feedback loop. Doubt leads to avoidance. Avoidance reinforces doubt, and the cycle continues. But here's where it gets interesting. This same mechanism can work in your favor. Every time you take action despite doubt, you create evidence that challenges your fear. Your brain begins to register a new pattern. Action leads to survival. Survival leads to growth, and growth becomes the new normal. Lady Gaga's journey perfectly illustrates this principle. Before she became the global icon we know today, Stefani Germanotta was a struggling artist playing in small bars across New York City. She faced constant rejection and battled intense self-doubt. But instead of waiting to feel confident, she created an alter ego, Lady Gaga, and acted her way into confidence. She would perform as if she was already a superstar, even when playing to nearly empty rooms. Each performance, regardless of the audience size, was treated with the same dedication and energy as if she were headlining Madison Square Garden. This wasn't fake it till you make it. This was strategic confidence building through deliberate action. What's crucial to understand about Gaga's approach is that she didn't wait for external validation to believe in herself. She created her own validation through consistent action. Every performance, every song, every appearance, even when she felt uncertain, was another brick in the foundation of her confidence. The transformation wasn't instant. There were nights when doubt crept in, when the audience was unresponsive, when critics were harsh. But she kept showing up, kept performing, kept taking action. Eventually, her external reality caught up with her internal conviction. By the time she achieved mainstream success, her confidence wasn't dependent on others' approval. It was built on thousands of moments where she chose action over hesitation. This is how real confidence is built, not through affirmations or positive thinking, but through consistent, deliberate action that proves to your brain that you are capable. Each small win creates momentum, and momentum is the fuel that powers lasting confidence. Think of confidence like a muscle. You don't get stronger by thinking about lifting weights. You get stronger by actually lifting them. Similarly, you don't become confident by thinking confident thoughts. You become confident by taking confident actions. Jay's story demonstrates how this works in practice. As someone who struggled with severe social anxiety, he found himself avoiding basic interactions, from ordering coffee to participating in meetings. His breakthrough came when he realized that waiting to feel confident was keeping him trapped. Instead of trying to eliminate his anxiety, Jay created a system of small, daily challenges. Day 1 was making eye contact with 3 strangers. Day 2 was asking a simple question in a store. Each challenge was small enough to be doable, but significant enough to create slight discomfort. The key to Jay's success wasn't that he suddenly became fearless. It was that he stopped making fear the deciding factor. He committed to taking action regardless of how he felt. Some days were harder than others, but each small victory created evidence that contradicted his self-doubt. Within weeks, Jay noticed something fascinating. Situations that once paralyzed him now felt manageable. Not because the situations had changed, but because he had built a new relationship with discomfort. He had proven to himself, through repeated action, that he could handle more than his fears suggested. After 3 months of consistent challenge-taking, Jay found himself voluntarily speaking up in meetings, initiating conversations with strangers, and even presenting at work conferences. His confidence wasn't perfect or unshakable, but it was real, built on a foundation of actual experience rather than wishful thinking. The lesson from Jay's story isn't that you need to overcome fear completely. It's that you need to act despite it. Every time you take action while feeling uncertain, you're rewiring your brain's confidence circuit. You're teaching your nervous system that action is safe, that growth is possible, and that you are more capable than your doubts suggest. Your challenge for the next 24 hours is simple but powerful. Identify one action you've been avoiding due to fear or self-doubt, and do it immediately. Don't wait until you feel ready. Don't wait until the conditions are perfect. The size of the action doesn't matter. What matters is breaking the pattern of hesitation. Whether it's making that phone call you've been putting off, speaking up in a meeting, or taking the first step toward a bigger goal. Take action now. Your confidence isn't waiting for you in the future, it's waiting for you on the other side of action. Remember, confidence isn't something you wait for, it's something you build, one brave action at a time. What action will you take today? Chapter 10. The Power of Decisive Action. Every day you make thousands of decisions. What to eat, what to focus on, how to respond to challenges. Most seem small, insignificant. But what if you realize that each choice is a vote for the person you are becoming? Right now, your life is the sum of your past decisions. If you want a different future, you don't need more luck or opportunity. You need to start making decisions as the person you want to be, not the person you've been. Your brain processes roughly 35,000 decisions each day. Most of these happen automatically, guided by patterns you've established over years. When you reach for your phone first thing in the morning, choose comfort over growth, or stay silent instead of speaking up. These aren't just isolated moments. They're reinforcements of who you believe yourself to be. The science behind decision-making reveals something fascinating. Your brain creates neural pathways based on repeated choices. Each time you make a decision, you're either strengthening existing pathways or creating new ones. This means every choice, no matter how small, is literally reshaping your brain's architecture. Jeff Bezos' story perfectly illustrates the transformative power of decisive action. In 1994, he was a successful executive at D.E. Shaw, one of Wall Street's most prestigious investment firms. He had security, status, and a clear path to wealth. But when he spotted the potential of the internet, he faced a decision that would alter not just his life, but the future of commerce. The conventional choice would have been to stay put, maybe start an online business as a side project. That's what most people would do. Hedge their bets, play it safe. But Bezos understood something crucial about decisions. They're not just about the immediate outcome. They're about who you become in the process. He chose to leave his secure position, move across the country, and start an online bookstore from his garage. This wasn't just about starting a business. It was about becoming someone who acts on vision rather than fear. Someone who pursues possibility over comfort. Each subsequent decision Bezos made, from expanding beyond books to investing in long-term growth over short-term profits, reinforced this identity. What's particularly noteworthy about Bezos' journey isn't just the outcome. It's the decision-making framework he used. He developed what he calls the regret minimization framework. Instead of asking what was safe or easy, he projected himself to age 80 and asked which decision he would least regret. This simple shift in perspective transformed seemingly risky choices into obvious ones. But transformative decisions don't always look dramatic from the outside. Sometimes the most powerful choices are the quiet ones we make when no one's watching. This brings us to Nina's story, a mid-level manager who had always played it safe in her career. Nina had talent and ideas, but she consistently chose the secure path, staying quiet in meetings, avoiding challenging projects, networking only with people who felt comfortable. Her decisions weren't wrong, they were simply aligned with her identity as someone who plays it safe. Her transformation began when she learned about identity-based decision-making. Instead of asking, "What should I do?" she started asking, "What would the successful leader I want to become do?" This subtle shift changed everything. When a challenging project came up that everyone else avoided, her old self would have stayed quiet. But the leader she wanted to become would step up. She volunteered. When she saw an opportunity to propose a new initiative, her instinct was to wait until it was perfect. But her future self would value progress over perfection. She presented her ideas. Each decision felt uncomfortable in the moment. But Nina wasn't deciding based on comfort. She was deciding based on growth. Within 3 months, people started treating her differently. Within 6 months, she was promoted to a position she previously thought was years away. The key to Nina's transformation wasn't that she made better decisions, it's that she made decisions as a better version of herself. Each choice, no matter how small, was a vote for who she was becoming. This is where most people get stuck. They wait to feel like their future self before making decisions as their future self. But identity follows action, not the other way around. You don't become confident and then take bold action. You take bold action and then become confident. Think about the decisions you've made in the last 24 hours. Each one was a vote for who you are becoming. When you hit snooze instead of getting up early, you voted for comfort over growth. When you chose to watch another episode instead of working on your goals, you voted for immediate gratification over long-term success. These aren't judgments. They're observations. Because once you understand that every decision is a vote for your identity, you gain the power to consciously reshape who you're becoming. The process is simple but profound. Before each decision, pause and ask yourself, who am I becoming with this choice? If you want to be someone who's fit and healthy, but you're deciding whether to skip the gym, the question isn't, should I work out? It's, am I choosing to be someone who prioritizes their health? If you want to be a successful entrepreneur, but you're deciding whether to stay in your comfort zone, the question isn't, should I take this risk? It's, am I choosing to be someone who acts on opportunities? This isn't about making perfect decisions. It's about making conscious ones. Because here's the truth. You're always voting for some version of yourself. The only question is whether you're doing it consciously or unconsciously. Chapter 11. The Power of Strategic Elimination. The secret to success isn't just knowing what to say yes to. It's knowing what to say no to. Right now, your life is filled with distractions, obligations, and habits that are stealing your energy and focus. Every yes to something unimportant is a no to something that truly matters. The truth is, most people aren't failing because they don't work hard enough. They're failing because they're too distracted to focus on what actually moves them forward. Your brain can only process so much information at once. Every notification, every minor commitment, every quick favor you agree to, they all consume mental bandwidth. This isn't just about time management, it's about energy management. Each decision, each task, each interaction either fuels your progress or depletes your resources. Think about the last week. How many times did you say yes to something that didn't align with your goals? How many hours did you spend on activities that added no real value to your life or future? These weren't just harmless diversions. They were active votes against your success. The concept of opportunity cost reveals a brutal truth. Everything you say yes to means saying no to something else. When you agree to attend that unnecessary meeting, you're saying no to focused work. When you scroll through social media just for a few minutes, you're saying no to reading that book that could transform your business. When you take on projects out of obligation rather than alignment, you're saying no to opportunities that could catapult you forward. J.K. Rowling's journey to creating Harry Potter perfectly illustrates this principle. While writing the first book, she was a single mother living on welfare. She had every reason to say yes to more immediate opportunities. Part-time jobs, social engagements, anything that might provide quick relief from her financial struggles. Instead, she made a radical choice. She eliminated everything that didn't serve her writing. She turned down social invitations, even when it meant feeling isolated. She distanced herself from people who drained her energy or questioned her focus. She worked in a small cafe, not because it was comfortable, but because it eliminated household distractions. Each no was a conscious investment in her bigger vision. What's particularly striking about Rowling's story isn't just her dedication, it's her clarity. She understood that success doesn't come from doing more things. It comes from doing the right things with complete focus. Her ruthless elimination of distractions wasn't about being antisocial or difficult. It was about protecting the energy she needed for her most important work. This brings us to Mason's story. Like many ambitious professionals, Mason believed that success meant saying yes to every opportunity. He joined multiple networking groups, sat on 3 different committees, and said yes to every project that came his way. He was busy, incredibly busy, but making no real progress toward his dream of starting his own business. His transformation began when he learned about strategic elimination. Instead of asking, "Can I do this?" he started asking, "Should I do this?" He evaluated every commitment through the lens of his ultimate goal. building his business. The first things to go were the networking groups that weren't aligned with his industry. Then he stepped down from 2 committees. He started declining pick-your-brain coffee meetings and redirecting that time to actual business development. Each no felt uncomfortable at first. He worried about disappointing people or missing opportunities. But something remarkable happened. The more he eliminated, the more energy and focus he had for what truly mattered. Within 3 months of implementing strategic elimination, Mason had completed his business plan, secured his first client, and made more progress than he had in the previous year of saying yes to everything. His story teaches us that success often requires subtraction before addition. The key to strategic elimination isn't just randomly saying no, it's having clear criteria for what deserves your attention. Before any commitment, ask yourself, does this move me closer to my goals? Does it energize me or drain me? Will this matter in 1 year? 5 years? Think about your current commitments. Each one is either moving you forward or holding you back. There is no neutral ground. That weekly meeting that could be an email? It's not just an hour of your time. It's an hour of your life that could be invested in something transformative. For the next 24 hours, your challenge is simple but powerful. Say no to one thing that drains your energy or distracts you from your bigger vision. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Start with something small. Decline a non-essential meeting. Turn off notifications. Step away from a commitment that no longer serves you. Chapter 12. Engineering your environment for success. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your environment. No matter how strong your willpower, if you're surrounded by negativity, distractions, and low standards, you'll struggle to succeed. But if you build an environment that reinforces your success, you won't have to force discipline. It will happen automatically. Right now, your surroundings are either pulling you forward or holding you back. The question is, are you living in an environment that makes success easier or one that keeps you stuck? Think about a fish in water. The fish doesn't notice the water, yet this invisible environment determines everything about how it moves, survives, and thrives. Your environment works the same way. It shapes your behavior, mindset, and potential in ways you might not even realize. Every morning when you wake up, your environment is already working on you. The notifications on your phone, the state of your workspace, the energy of the people around you, all of these factors are silently programming your brain, setting the tone for your decisions and actions throughout the day. The science behind environmental influence is clear. Your brain constantly adapts to its surroundings, forming neural pathways that reflect your regular experiences. If you're in an environment of excellence, your brain will wire itself for excellence. If you're in an environment of mediocrity, your brain will normalize mediocrity. Serena Williams' story perfectly illustrates this principle. From the moment she could hold a tennis racket, her father, Richard Williams, deliberately engineered an environment of excellence. He didn't just teach her tennis. He created a complete ecosystem designed to produce a champion. Before dawn each morning, young Serena would practice on public tennis courts in Compton, California. Richard would write out daily affirmations and post them around their home. He ensured she was always surrounded by competitive energy, whether through training with her sister Venus or competing in junior tournaments. Even during rain, they would practice. Richard collected old tennis balls and studied instructional videos to create the most effective training environment possible. What's fascinating about Serena's story isn't just the training itself, it's how this carefully crafted environment shaped her identity. She didn't have to force herself to work hard or stay focused. Excellence became her default mode because that's what her environment demanded. Every aspect of her surroundings reinforced the same message. Greatness is the only option. This wasn't just about tennis courts and training schedules. Richard Williams understood that mental environment was just as crucial as physical surroundings. He shielded his daughters from negative influences while exposing them to examples of excellence in various fields. He created an atmosphere where high achievement wasn't just encouraged, it was expected. The results speak for themselves. Serena Williams became not just a tennis champion, but one of the greatest athletes in history. Her environment didn't just support her success, it made success inevitable. This brings us to Lucy's story. Like many professionals, Lucy struggled with procrastination and lack of focus. She had tried everything: productivity apps, time management techniques, even meditation, but nothing seemed to stick. Why? Because she was trying to change her behavior without changing her environment. Lucy's workspace was cluttered with distractions. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications. Her social media feeds were filled with time-wasting content. She spent lunch breaks with colleagues who complained about their jobs and discouraged ambition. Her environment was literally programmed for failure. The transformation began when Lucy understood that willpower alone wasn't enough. She needed to engineer her surroundings for success. First, she completely redesigned her workspace. She cleared all clutter, created a dedicated work area, and removed every possible distraction. Her phone went into Do Not Disturb mode during focus hours. But Lucy didn't stop there. She realized that her social environment was just as important as her physical space. She started spending time with ambitious people who inspired her. She joined a mastermind group of high achievers. She even changed her commute route to avoid the negative break room conversations that used to drain her energy. The most powerful change came in her digital environment. Lucy unfollowed accounts that promoted procrastination or negative thinking. She curated her social media feeds to show only content that inspired growth. She set up browser extensions that blocked distracting websites during work hours. Within weeks, Lucy noticed something remarkable. She wasn't fighting against procrastination anymore. Her new environment naturally pulled her toward productivity. When her workspace was clean and organized, focusing became effortless. When her phone wasn't buzzing with notifications, deep work happened automatically. When she was surrounded by ambitious people, taking action became her default mode. Your environment is either working for you or against you. Every object in your space, every person in your circle, every notification on your phone is programming your brain in some way. The key is to make these influences intentional rather than accidental. Think about your current environment. Is your workspace designed for focus or distraction? Are the people around you lifting you up or pulling you down? Does your digital environment feed your ambition or steal your attention? Remember, changing your environment isn't about perfection. It's about progress. Small changes in your surroundings can create massive shifts in your behavior and results. A clean desk might seem trivial, but it sends a powerful message to your brain about standards and expectations. Unfollowing negative social media accounts might seem minor, but it dramatically affects your daily thought patterns. The most successful people don't rely on constant motivation or infinite willpower. Instead, they create environments that make success the path of least resistance. They understand that it's easier to change your surroundings than to force yourself to resist them. For the next 24 hours, make one tangible change to your environment that supports your success. Clear your workspace completely. Put your phone in another room during focus time. Unfollow accounts that waste your time or drain your energy. Change where you spend your breaks. Move your alarm clock across the room so you have to get up to turn it off. Choose one change and commit to it fully. Notice how this single environmental shift affects your behavior, energy, and results. Remember, you don't have to overhaul everything at once. Start with one intentional change, and let that success build momentum for larger transformations. Your environment is either your greatest ally or your biggest obstacle. Which will you choose? Chapter 13. The Power of 1% Progress. Most people believe success requires a massive breakthrough, an overnight transformation. But the truth is, the most powerful changes come from the small things you do every single day. Right now, you don't need a radical shift. You need to be just 1% better every day. Imagine compounding a tiny improvement daily. Over time, that 1% isn't just an improvement. It's exponential growth. Think about water dripping on a rock. One drop seems insignificant, but over time, that consistent dripping can carve through solid stone. Your daily actions work the same way. Small, consistent improvements slowly but inevitably reshape your reality. The math of compound improvement is staggering. If you improve just 1% each day for a year, You'll end up 37 times better than when you started. Not 365% better, 3,700% better. This is because each improvement builds on the last, creating exponential rather than linear growth. Sir David Brailsford revolutionized British cycling with this exact principle. When he became head of British cycling in 2002, the team had won only one Olympic gold medal in its 76-year history. Instead of promising overnight success, Brailsford introduced the concept of marginal gains, seeking 1% improvements in everything. His team looked at obvious things like training and nutrition, but they went further. They tested different massage gels to see which led to the fastest muscle recovery. They hired a surgeon to teach riders the best way to wash their hands to reduce illness. They even discovered that certain pillow types led to better sleep and thus better performance. Each change seemed almost trivial on its own, but together, these tiny improvements created a stunning transformation. Under Brailsford's leadership, British cyclists won 60% of the gold medals available at the 2008 Beijing Olympics. At the 2012 London Olympics, they set 9 Olympic records and 7 world records. This wasn't magic, it was math. The compound effect of consistent small improvements created unstoppable momentum. The key insight from Brailsford's approach isn't just about making small improvements. It's about making them consistently. Many people can make a 1% improvement once. Few can do it every day. But those who do change their lives permanently. Jonas, an aspiring writer, discovered this power firsthand. For years, he dreamed of writing a novel, but felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of the task. Every time he sat down to write, the blank page seemed to mock him. The thought of writing hundreds of pages paralyzed him with anxiety. Then he made a simple commitment. Write for just 5 minutes every day. Not an hour, not even 30 minutes, just 5. It seemed almost laughably small, but that was the point. It was so easy that he couldn't talk himself out of it. The first few days, Jonas wrote barely a paragraph, but he showed up consistently. Some days, the 5 minutes naturally extended to 15 or 20 as he got into the flow. Other days, he stuck to just 5 minutes. The key was that he never missed. After a month, those 5-minute sessions had become an unbreakable habit. His daily word count gradually increased. His writing improved incrementally as he practiced regularly. Most importantly, his identity shifted. He no longer saw himself as someone who wanted to write a book, but as someone who wrote every day. Within a year, Jonas had completed his first novel, not through Herculean effort or dramatic inspiration, but through tiny, consistent actions that compounded over time. Your path to extraordinary results follows the same principle. Right now, you might feel overwhelmed by the gap between where you are and where you want to be. But you don't need to bridge that gap in one leap. You just need to improve by 1% today, and then do it again tomorrow. This isn't about making dramatic changes or sacrificing everything for your goals. It's about finding small, sustainable improvements you can maintain consistently. Maybe it's reading 1 page of a book each morning. Perhaps it's doing 2 minutes of exercise, or making 1 sales call before lunch. The size of the action matters far less than the consistency with which you perform it. A small action you actually do is infinitely more valuable than a grand plan you never start. For the next 24 hours, choose 1 small action, something so easy you can't fail, that moves you toward your biggest goal. Commit to doing it, no matter what. Remember, you're not trying to transform overnight. You're laying the first brick in an empire built 1 tiny improvement at a time. What's your 1% improvement going to be today? Chapter 14. Speed of Implementation. Most people think about what they want to do. They plan, research, and analyze, yet never actually take action. The difference between those who succeed and those who don't? Speed of implementation. The faster you take action on an idea, the more momentum you build. If you hesitate, doubt creeps in, and opportunity slips away. Right now, your success is waiting, not for the perfect time, but for you to move. Your mind is designed to protect you from risk, which means it will always find reasons to wait. But here's the truth. Waiting is often riskier than acting. While you're planning the perfect moment, someone else is already building momentum, learning from real experience, and creating results. The science behind this is clear. The longer you wait to act on an idea, the less likely you are to ever do it. This isn't just about procrastination, it's about how your brain processes opportunity and risk. When you delay action, your mind begins generating doubts and fears, making the task seem increasingly daunting. But when you act quickly, you bypass this resistance mechanism entirely. Richard Branson embodies this principle perfectly. When he launched Virgin Airlines, he didn't have a fleet of planes or years of aviation experience. He had one chartered plane and a bold idea. During a flight cancellation to the Virgin Islands, instead of accepting defeat, he took immediate action. He chartered a plane on the spot, borrowed a blackboard, and wrote, "Virgin Airlines, $39 one way to Virgin Islands." He walked around the airport, selling tickets to other stranded passengers. Most people would have waited until they had a proper airline business plan. They would have analyzed the market, studied the competition, and probably talked themselves out of it entirely. But Branson understood that imperfect action beats perfect planning every time. That single chartered flight became the foundation of Virgin Airlines, now worth billions. The key insight from Branson's approach isn't just about being bold, it's about the speed of execution. He didn't wait until he felt ready or until conditions were perfect. He saw an opportunity and acted immediately, figuring out the details as he went along. The same principle applies to every area of life. Whether you're starting a business, improving your health, or learning a new skill, speed of implementation is often the determining factor between success and stagnation. Consider Camilla, a marketing professional who always had brilliant ideas but struggled to bring them to life. She would spend weeks researching, planning, and perfecting her proposals, only to find that by the time she was ready, the opportunity had passed, or someone else had already implemented a similar idea. Everything changed when she implemented the 10-minute rule. Anytime she had an idea that excited her, she had to take some form of action within 10 minutes. It didn't have to be big, sending an email, making a call, or writing the first draft of a proposal. The size of the action didn't matter. The speed did. The first time she applied this rule, she had an idea for a social media campaign. Instead of spending weeks planning, she quickly drafted the concept and presented it to her manager that same afternoon. The campaign wasn't perfect, but it was real. Her manager approved it immediately, impressed by her initiative. This small success created a snowball effect. Camilla began applying the 10-minute rule to everything. When she had an idea for improving team communication, she immediately set up a pilot program. When she saw an opportunity for a new client partnership, she made the call right away instead of waiting for the perfect pitch. Within 6 months, she had implemented more ideas than she had in the previous 2 years combined. Her quick action not only led to better results, but also built her reputation as someone who made things happen. She was promoted twice in 1 year, not because she had the best ideas, but because she was the fastest to turn ideas into reality. The 72-hour challenge is your opportunity to break free from analysis paralysis and build momentum through immediate action. Think about something you've been putting off, a business idea, a conversation you need to have, a project you've been meaning to start. Now, you have 72 hours to take meaningful action on it. Remember, this isn't about completing the entire goal in 72 hours. It's about taking that crucial first step that commits you to the path. Maybe it's registering a domain name for your business idea, sending that important email, or writing the first page of your book. The specific action matters less than the speed with which you take it. Chapter 15. Pressure makes diamonds. When things get hard, most people break. They quit, make excuses, or shrink back to their comfort zones. But success doesn't go to the most talented or the luckiest. It goes to those who can handle pressure without losing momentum. Life will test you. The question is, will you crack under the pressure or use it to make yourself stronger? Every achievement worth having lies on the other side of discomfort. Your brain is wired to protect you from stress, to seek comfort and safety. But this protective instinct, left unchecked, becomes the very thing that holds you back from greatness. The ability to stay focused and effective under pressure isn't a gift. It's a skill that can be developed through deliberate practice and the right mindset. The science behind mental toughness is fascinating. Under pressure, your body releases cortisol and adrenaline, preparing you for fight or flight. Most people interpret these physiological responses as anxiety or fear. But elite performers have learned to recognize these same sensations as signs of readiness, their body preparing them for peak performance. Michael Jordan's story perfectly illustrates this principle. When he was cut from his high school basketball team, he faced a pivotal moment that would have crushed most people's spirits. Instead of accepting this verdict as final, he transformed that rejection into rocket fuel for his ambition. Every morning, he would wake up at 6 a.m. to practice before school. He deliberately sought out stronger opponents to play against, knowing that only by facing superior competition could he elevate his game. But what's often overlooked in Jordan's story is how he systematically built his mental toughness. He didn't just practice basketball, he practiced performing under pressure. He would create high-stakes situations in practice, putting immense pressure on himself to make crucial shots. He would trash-talk his teammates to raise the emotional intensity of practice games. Every day, he deliberately made things harder for himself, understanding that comfort was the enemy of greatness. The result? When actual game pressure came, it felt familiar. While others crumbled in crucial moments, Jordan thrived. He didn't just handle pressure, he craved it. This wasn't natural talent. It was carefully cultivated mental toughness. The key insight from Jordan's approach isn't just about working hard. It's about deliberately seeking out pressure and training yourself to perform under it. This same principle applies whether you're building a business, advancing your career, or pursuing any meaningful goal. Consider Isla, a first-time entrepreneur who launched her digital marketing agency with high hopes but zero clients. The first month, she made 100 cold calls and got 100 rejections. Most people would have quit, convinced the market was too tough or they weren't cut out for entrepreneurship. But Isla did something different. She started tracking her rejections, treating them like data points rather than personal failures. She set a goal to collect 50 no's each week, knowing that each rejection brought her closer to a yes. She recorded her sales calls and forced herself to listen to them, noting where she could improve. The turning point came when she realized that her hands stopped shaking during calls. Her voice became steadier. The pit in her stomach disappeared. Not because the calls got easier, but because she got stronger. She had built her pressure tolerance through deliberate exposure and practice. Within 6 months, Isla had landed her first major client. Within a year, she had a waiting list. When asked about her success, she points to those first 100 rejections as her most valuable asset. "Those weren't failures," she says. "They were my training ground for mental toughness." Your challenge for the next 24 hours is simple but powerful. Choose one thing that makes you uncomfortable, something you've been avoiding because it feels too hard or too stressful. It could be making that difficult phone call, having that challenging conversation, or tackling that project that intimidates you. Don't just do it. Study yourself while doing it. Notice your physical reactions, your emotional responses. Remember, these sensations aren't warnings to stop. They're signs that you're growing stronger. Conclusion. Congratulations, not on finishing this audiobook, but on beginning your new life. Over this audiobook, you've done more than learn concepts or gather information. You've fundamentally rewired who you are at the deepest level. But this isn't the end of your journey. It's the beginning. The real test starts now, as you step back into your daily life with your new operating system. The old programming will try to reassert itself. Your environment, your old habits, maybe even the people around you will unconsciously try to pull you back to who you used to be. Don't let them. Most importantly, you've discovered that success isn't something external you need to chase. It's an identity you step into. Every morning when you wake up, you have a choice. Will you live as your old self, or will you fully embody the person you've become through this transformation? The tools you've gained aren't theoretical. They're practical weapons in your arsenal for life. But knowledge isn't power. Applied knowledge is power. Starting right now, you must live these principles. Every decision, every action, every response must come from your new programming, not your old habits. Your transformation isn't complete. It never will be. Growth is a continuous journey, not a destination. But now you have something most people never develop: the ability to consciously direct that growth instead of letting life happen to you. The world needs what you have to offer. It needs the business you'll build, the art you'll create, the impact you'll make when operating at your highest level. Don't rob the world of that gift by shrinking back into old patterns. Step boldly into your future. Take action with confidence. Make decisions with clarity. Live with purpose and power. Because that's who you are now, not who you're trying to become. The next chapter of your life starts now. Make it count. Thank you for listening and for investing in yourself. I believe in you. Your potential is endless. Thank you for listening and for investing in yourself. I believe in you. Your potential is endless. Now go out there and create the life you deserve.